Hi, my name is Michael Crummey. I'm the author of The Innocents, a novel that is among the 3 novels that have been nominated for this year's Raddall Atlantic Fiction Prize. The novel is about a brother and sister, Ada and Everett Best, who at a point in the fairly distant past are orphaned. They lose their mother and father and their baby sister in one awful winter. And they're left alone in this tiny cove, more or less to fend for themselves. They're 9 and 11 years old when the novel opens, and I didn't choose those ages arbitrarily. When I was thinking about what age they would be at the start of this story, I was thinking about my own father. And my dad grew up fishing with my grandfather, and he started fishing down on the Labrador coast when he was 9 years old. Although he always says he didn't take on a full share of the crew until he was 11. So when I was thinking about Ada and Everett being left to themselves to try and survive, I thought at the age of 11 and 9, they would probably know enough about the business of living in that cove and the business of fishing that they wouldn't necessarily starve to death. So I'm just going to read a very short section from their first summer alone in the cove when they're trying to make a go of the fishing on their own. They were on the move hours before first light. Everett cut up his bait on the stage and rowed out through the harbor mouth into the maze of constellations reflected on the ocean's surface or through the black morning under cloud. The boat almost too much for his boyish frame, his hands coming up around his ears on each stroke. But he had a line in the water as the day broke. He fished in fog and driving rain and in bald, glassy sunshine so fierce it struck at him like a hammer. He wouldn't turn for home until he'd filled the fish pound and the little cuddy in the bow, and sometimes the bilge at his feet as well, the gunwale standing barely a hand's breadth above the water, the boat riding low and sluggish with that much weight, and he was next to foundering in crosswinds on occasion, his heart in his throat as he hauled for the cove. He worked the barrow ledge, or the Fogarty shoals, or the Wester shoal, or the Razor ledge, choosing according to some guesswork as to where the cod might be feeding that day, based on the wind and which direction the tide was running. If he didn't strike within an hour's time, Everett moved to some other likely spot. But once he was into the fish, he worked until he had the fill of his boat, running lines fore and aft. Ada spent the earliest hours of each indistinguishable day hauling water from the brook and baking the day's bread. When the sun was above the horizon, she walked up to the farm garden where she harvested the rocks brought to the surface by last winter's frost heave, before setting the seed potatoes and turnips and cabbages and beets. From the downs, she could see the shoal ground Everett was working, and when he took in his line and turned for the harbor, she walked down to help clear the morning's catch. The 2 children wielding knives honed to a razor's edge, up to their slender wrists in the blood and offal, their heads wreathed by galling halos of black flies and mosquitoes. It took them hours longer to get through a boatload than it had with 4 at the splitting table, which often meant there wasn't light enough for a second haul out, and they spent the evening working the garden together instead. When there was time enough for an afternoon run, Ada went out with Everett. They stood at the gunwale, bringing the hooked cod to the surface hand over hand like they were drawing up pitchers of water from a well. He taught her the marks for each shoal, the black dog close on the eastern head, the notch midway between the tilt and the fox's ears, and she rode them to the top when they were drawing off the grounds. They caught what could be taken before the sky went duckish, and they sat side by side to share the burden of the oars on the trip in. They ate before clearing the second run, standing up for fear of falling asleep if they sat, mopping their plates clean with bread and nodding over mugs of tea. It was dark by the time they walked back to the stage, and they made the fish by the light of wrought oil burning in a slut lamp. Midnight or later, before they were done, and they muddled up the rise in the dark, punch-drunk and mute. They slept together until the weather warmed enough to make the company a discomfort, and they took to opposite bunks, surrendering to the leaden weight of sleep as soon as they lay down.